Welcome to Belts, Bops, and Barbed Wire, a podcast brought to you by DMV Wrestling News at dmwrestlingnews.com. I'm your host, Jeff Quinton, and I'll be interviewing guests from the world of professional wrestling from the Mid-Atlantic region and beyond. Thanks for joining us. I want to say a few words before we get into the interviews. This is a very special podcast remembering Brandon Holman, who wrestled as Dick Dynamo and Boom Hayden. This podcast was on hiatus when Brandon passed away, so I wanted to be sure the first episode when it came back was one to help remember him. I want to thank my guests, JB Anderson, Miami Mike Walker, Hellfire McGuire, Stephen Fuerte, Boom Harden, and Isaiah Wolf for all joining me to remember Brandon. I also want to thank Mason Burden for her assistance with this episode. I need to also thank everyone whose assistance, financial or otherwise, helped me bring back the podcast. I especially want to thank Josh Gonzalez, whose support has been essential to the relaunch. I want to encourage everyone listening to reach out to friends and family members you haven't heard from in a while. Let them know you're thinking about them and that you care. If any of our listeners are struggling with emotional or other issues, please talk to a family member or friend. Remember, people care about you. Don't ever forget that. If you need immediate help, you can call 988 for assistance. Now we'll move on to the interview segments of the show. Thanks. I'm joined now, remembering Brandon Holman, by JB Anderson, who was his tag team partner in the past as a member of Thrash Society when Brandon was wrestling under the name Boom Hayden. Welcome, JB.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me.
As I start out, I wanted just to ask how you got into pro wrestling in the first place and how you got your career started.
I got mine started in October of 2020 is when I started training. I was going crazy, being stuck in the house, and finally had the free time to go get trained properly. I figured with everything crazy going on in the world, why not try some since I was a kid.
Tell me about how you met Brandon the first time and what your first impression was.
I first met him when I was training at MCW. He stood out because he was the probably most intense person while doing drills. I've never seen anyone like move like a machine like he did. Like his cardio was like insane. Like I cannot stress enough how wild this man was when it came to getting up and down from burpees, sprinting around. Like dude was an animal. And he was like, personality-wise, very intense initially, but once he saw that you wanted to be there, he started warming up to you, and he became, like, your best friend.
You traveled with him a lot. What was it like being on the road with him?
It was fun. Me and him would, we'd listen to music, we'd bust each other's balls about, like, what we liked. He would go out of his way to try to play stuff that would annoy the hell out of me sometimes. Mainly just to get a reaction out of me and hear me, like, riff on whatever it was that he was listening to. But, yeah, no, it was fun. Always, like, we're always laughing, talking about ridiculous stuff we wanted to do. We had, like, a year's worth of angles we planned for when Thrash Society would inevitably break up, and we, feud with each other and had all these crazy ideas and things that, unfortunately, never came to fruition.
I heard he got a book of gimmicks that had all these variations of Boom Hayden in it, but also he had the Dick Dynamo personality and gimmicks in it. Can you talk about the change, the gimmicks and the change to Dick Dynamo from Boom?
Me and him, when we were starting to kind of like, fizzle away from doing Thrash Society, like we were trying to figure out like what his next move would be. And he started telling me about this Dick Dynamo character. And the way he was describing it, I was like, okay, like, because I had made a joke, like, to him months before this, about, someone should do a trivia host, but as a wrestling character. And he was like, oh, that wouldn't work. And I was like, nah, think of it, like, you got someone in a headlock and you start asking people questions in the crowd, and then if they get it wrong, you rake the headlock harder, just some silly, like, shit to do, like, back and forth. And then, a few months down the road, the Dick Dynamo character comes up, and he's like, yeah, he's kind of like a game show host, but he's like the Riddler, and he was, like, taking all these, like, little pieces of it. And the more and more he fleshed it out, the more we talked about it, and the more he we workshopped it while we drove. I think he inevitably went over to, I think it was CZW that kind of helped him figure out how to do it or how to bring it to life the way it did. But that was, to me, I feel like Dick Dynamo was the most Brendan was ever able to be Brendan in his wrestling career. He was 100% dialed in on that thing.
Which explains a lot now when I saw him at Fan Jam when he was hosting trivia at MCW's Fan Jam last year.
Oh, yeah.
Also goes along with something that Mike told me about how when the character was in development, they shot some videos, and then the video that eventually came out was him, what he became as Dick Dynamo, and that it was just Clockwork Orange type character.
Yeah. It was a very Clockwork Orangey sort of vibe to it. That's where it went, and I'm so happy it went that way.
And I mean, he even invited me to trivia one time, so I got a bit of that too. So
that's awesome. Yeah, his trivia stuff, he was always sending me video and sharing video on his social media of him at the trivia place he did in, I think it was either in Towson or near Baltimore. I can't remember exactly, but yeah, it was.
It's Peabody Heights Brewery in downtown Baltimore.
That's right.
Do you have any specific in-ring memories?
I know. So Brendan helped me a ton with getting comfortable with wrestling. I did a lot of early on when they're giving us practice matches, we're doing the birthday parties and stuff when I was at MCW, and he was my first singles birthday party match. Walked through this whole idea for me, really helped me kind of figure out how to be comfortable when I was a nervous wreck, even though there's no reason to be. I'm just wrestling in front of children. Who cares, But you're still nervous because you're all right, I want to make sure I do everything right. But he was able to keep me pretty calm through it. But yeah, he was always really good at keeping me centered whenever either we were wrestling against each other or we were wrestling as a tag team.
I know I talked to Isaiah Wolf about how much he got in-ring psychology and how much he could work with that and talk about that, and I just wonder if you had any thoughts on that.
His psychology was, I think, better than people gave him credit for, because there was a lot of times where he had really good ideas and stuff that made it made sense in his head, and I feel like the way he explained it to people, it didn't land, because you're really excited when you're explaining stuff. When calling a match, and I think that his excitement sometimes made it to where some people were oh, okay, I don't think that works, but we'd go back and talk about it again, and it would come out the way that he intended, but he had a brilliant mind for wrestling, and I don't think people noticed it enough. But yeah, his in-ring psychology, I think, was really, really on point.
What kind of larger impact do you think he had on the wrestling companies and the other wrestlers that he wrestled with?
I think that his work ethic is something that a lot of wrestlers would be able to learn from, and he just always was good attitude, worked hard. I'm sure this is the same stuff everyone has said. He always gave 110% no matter what. He never never cried about nothing, never said anything negative. He rolled with the punches. If he believed in something, he stood on it. I think always busting your ass and sticking up for yourself is something that a lot of people were going to be able to take away from knowing him.
One more question. I just wanted to ask you what you personally will remember the most about him moving forward.
Definitely his obsession with eating baked beans out of a can. But no, one of the lasting impressions he's going to have on me is that he really encouraged me to do what makes me happy in wrestling. He said, if you're not having fun and if you're not enjoying yourself, why do it? And that's what ultimately kind of helped me get my vision of what I wanted to do, what I wanted to be, where I wanted to go. And if it wasn't for him, kind of pushing me out of the nest and watching me fly on my own, probably wouldn't be doing what I'm doing right now. So I owe a lot to him for like encouraging me to just kind of go and gamble on myself.
Thanks a lot for being with me to talk about Brandon today, and I look forward to talking to you again sometime on the podcast in the future.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, man.
And my next guest on this special podcast, Remembering Brandon Holman, is Boom Harden.
Hey man, how you doing?
And just great. How are
I'm
you
doing
doing?
just fine.
It's good to have you on. And I just wanted to ask you to talk about first how you got into professional wrestling in the beginning.
All right, so I got into how I became a fan of wrestling, and then got into it, or like how I actually got into the business.
How you got into the business.
All right, so I want to say I was like an early teenager, around 13 or so, and I was researching wrestling. At this point, I was dead set on becoming a professional wrestler because I've been a fan for so long. So in my research, I found that an easy way into the business, well, not necessarily an easy way, but a surefire way into the business was just being at shows and helping. So when I was young, I used to go with a friend to the local ECWA shows back when I used to run over in Jersey in Woodbury. And I just stay around after the show and just help put away chairs. Eventually, guys started seeing me around, and I just did ring crew until I started training around the time I turned 15. That's when I started training.
Okay, could you tell me about how you met Brandon and what your first impressions were of him?
All right. So I first became aware of him. I want to say maybe 2016 or 2017. I was at a CZW show, and Phil Stamper told me, "Hey, you know there's a Boom Hayden, right?" And my world was rocked only because like I thought it was absolutely hilarious. There was an individual named Boom Hayden when I'm Boom Harden. So I went for several years just like knowing about him. And then he started coming around training, and I met him in 2020. And it was like we had both knew of each other because we both had similar friends. In particular, Ryo from because they trained at MCW together. So like our very first meeting, we just instantly clicked in being like on the same kind of time as far as like, all right, we are a massive in joke, and let's just keep rocking out with it. So like every time we see each other, we just like have like a big stare off, and oftentimes we'd have a big mega powers kind of handshake.
You're the second person I heard mention the Mega Powers handshake.
Really, I'm the second.
Yeah, I interviewed Miami Mike and Hellfire McGuire the other day, so one of them mentioned it, I think.
Oh man. Okay, glad to know I wasn't the only one.
I know, like you said, he was Boom Harden. You're Boom Harden. He was Boom Hayden. I'm even mixing it up now. And then he went to the Dick Dynamo character, and I know I'd known him as Boom at MCW shows, and then the first time I saw the Dick Dynamo character was at a CZW show, and it didn't even click that it was him at first. He was so well in character, so I finally figured it out and had to convince my daughter that it was really him. Finally, at a MCW event at Fan Jam, when he had the hat off, I convinced her it was him then, and otherwise she was arguing with me. So, just what'd you think of the transition from Boom to Dick?
It was something that I really liked to see, but at the same time, I felt very much at fault for it because it was just honestly a clash. Because it is quite confusing having two individuals named Boomed, and it's very much more confusing when they have similar last names that are just off by one letter each. So he was a consummate professional, and he was the one that bit the bullet, and he was the one that was willing to change his name.
Were you involved in many matches with him in the ring?
So I only was able to wrestle him, I want to say twice. And I remember the first time specifically because we were wrestling for a company called Generation Lucha Libre. And it was it was the first and only ever Boom versus Boom match where the winner got to keep the name of Boom. And it was a draw. And then the second time it was in a tag team gauntlet at CZW, and it was an absolute blast working with them.
Was there some impact that he had on your wrestling career besides the name situation? Was there anything that an impact that he had on your career or on the people you worked with?
I always enjoyed looking forward to seeing him because he was a very entertaining and just generally fun and funny person. Where even though I'll be feeling very bad on a particular day, I knew that seeing him and being around him and making jokes with him would definitely bring me some kind of levity.
What impact do you think he had on the other wrestlers at CZW and other companies that you saw him at?
I think I believe that many people feel very similar to the way I do, where being around Boom, he just brought like a warmth and just like if you really needed a laugh at a show, have Boom say something. He was a very wild and out of pocket individual, and I absolutely loved him for it.
Hi, I'm joined by Stephen Forte to discuss the late Brandon Holman and his impact on wrestling in the area. Start out by just saying hello. How are you doing tonight?
What's going on, man? I'm doing all right. How about yourself?
Doing good. Start things off. I want to ask briefly how you got into professional wrestling as a wrestler.
Well, like all of us, I was a fan of it growing up, you know. I loved it. I remember being obsessed with it in school. And as we all grew up, kind of grew out of it a little bit, just like I feel like we all had that kind of phase. And then, fast forward a few, like, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago, I started watching it again. And I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. And in the back of my mind, I was like, I could probably do that. I could probably do that. And after a while, I was like, why don't I do that? So I gave it a shot and went in with the mindset as if I do this and I fail, at least I can say I gave it a shot and I'm not going to be 30, 40 years wondering what could have been. So I gave it a shot and I wasn't too bad at it. I'd like to say that's how I got into it. Found the school. The school was MCW. The rest is history.
Did you meet Brandon at MCW in school?
Actually, first day of my official training, that's exactly when I met him. Yeah, that's where I met him.
Your laughter at your experience meeting him was similar to the ones that other people like Miami Mike Walker and Hellfire McGuire told me last week.
Yeah, yeah. Well, as you could probably tell, Brandon was a huge character, man. I remember I went in with the mindset, I'm gonna be serious. I'm gonna do this like no playing around, no jokes. And in the training, a typical training day, start with warm ups, starting around, push ups, jumping jacks, sit ups, all that good stuff. And Brandon was actually one of the guys leading the warm up. And I just remember, man. First of all, the big mullet. He had the mullet at the time, so that stood out. And I also remember we were doing squats, you know, typical down, up, one. This dude, man, Brandon being Brandon, down, up, down, up, down, up. Like he was just messing with me. I'm like, dude, what is this guy doing, man? I was like, I just remember thinking, I was like, this guy's, I don't like him. I don't like him at all. But that's how he was, man. He grows on you.
That sounds familiar from what I'm hearing from other people as well. What were your impressions of him in the wrestling ring?
Man, in the ring, dude, he was great. Uh, but working with him was so frustrating because him being him, like anyone would tell you, just has a way about him. He's like, why don't we do things this way? Why don't we do things this way? And we would butt heads a lot. And it's like the universe knew I had some kind of feeling towards him. Like, man, this guy, every single drill we got paired on for some reason. Every single practice match we got paired together. All the way up to we had these birthday parties in MCW. My first ever birthday party match was against him. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me. He was great, man. All that all that aside, definitely made me feel comfortable out there. He was great at communicating, and he was a character, man. That's all I could say.
Do you think he had a similar impact on everyone else he met through wrestling?
Absolutely, man. In wrestling, you'll have people that you meet that you're not sure what they're like. You try to get a read on people. It's not even in wrestling. In real life, you try to get a read on people. But with Brandon, man, what you saw is what you got. He was outlandish, a big character. He was a little much at times, but that's why we loved him. When he wasn't joking and you could have a serious conversation with him, he would listen, he would be there for you, and like he was there for me plenty of times.
I know I heard that too, and I also heard some people who said he was good at talking about ring psychology. I know Isaiah Wolf told me that last when I talked to him the other day about how he understood the ring psychology. And if you go back to what Mike and Hellfire told me about how he had the book, the gimmick book that had so many gimmicks that were just variations of Boom Hayden before he'd even gotten to Dick Dynamo yet.
Yeah, man, that's pretty much took the words right out of my mouth. But that book character, I remember he went through. We saw Brandon as Boom Hayden, sidekick to like I think it was Sean Cannon, right? I think he was paired with him for a while, and he had all these characters. And when they gave him a character, he really dove into it. So it wasn't like, oh, we'll give you something, he made it fail. Like no, he made the most of it, and he was great at doing that. And finally, when he was given a like guess you could say, here, what do you want to do? Came up with this big Dynamo character, and I'll tell you what, man, that's like the most excited I've ever seen him, the most tuned in I've ever seen him. Just sucks that I never got to be in the ring with Dick Dynamo.
What are the things that you're going to remember about Brandon moving forward?
Man, things I don't remember about him, man, is just the down to earth, real person he was. Anyone would tell you in the ring, he was one of the hardest workers in the training facility. Nobody busted their ass as much as he did. But just what a good person he actually was. All the joking around aside, all the annoyingness aside, like if you needed to speak to him, he'd be there for you. If you needed to call somebody, he'd pick up the phone. I remember him just shooting me messages every now and then when I was going through my recovery a few months back. He commented like on one of my posts, something stupid, him being him. And he was like, hey man, how you doing? And we had a nice little exchange. This is how he was, jokester, but always there for somebody when they needed them.
Talking now with Isaiah Wolf about Brandon Holman, I just want to start out by asking you to speak about how you got into pro wrestling.
Age of like 3 or 4, my pops was an avid wrestling fan, and he would watch it. And my pops was my first hero, so I wanted to be interested, or he was interested in regards to television and Nintendo. Wrestling kind of took a life of its own for me. And when I got it, I pretty much had everything cemented in my life. I just plunged right in. The first place I went to was Johnny Rod's, and then from there I went to work in wrestling for like 5 years, until I felt like it was time for me to, you know, travel abroad and learn, everything about wrestling in some variety of places, from the England Wrestling Academy, PZW, WXW, like PCW UK, Pro Wrestling Holland Academy. I did everything in my power to make myself as worldly and knowledgeable and professional as I could and can.
Could you talk about the first time you met Brandon and what your first impressions were?
I actually first met him at CZW. when he was known as Boom Hayden. That was my first interaction with him, and like normally they tell you like this is a handsome match for me over there. So I solidify myself as a single competitor and stuff. But but he was eager. He was willing to pretty much try and help me get over as a singles, and it was very enthusiastic and you know optimistic and eager to try to put on a good display. And with that kind of energy, I was like, yo, I don't want to do this tonight. I'm gonna demolish it in this ring. If I can tell a story where all of a sudden I still look strong and you look strong, moving forward, going down the road where I could do something with you, then let's do that. And he quite receptive and it was just a blast to work with him. And the fact that I got to wrestle him on his birthday was even cooler because I got to hit him in the face with cake.
I know you told me before that you actually had the chance to talk to him about in-ring psychology and how that played into things, and if you could elaborate on that for me.
I know when he became Dick Dynamo, he was I think he was saying he was having fun with that character to a degree, but he also wanted to not come off comical, and he wanted to have his own identity. And I was just like, well, he felt like he was at a breaking point, or he wanted his character to have a breaking point, which is sinister. And I was bet. I was and we just sat down for an hour and a half, just talking about movies like movie Seven, The Torch, Joker, just variations of how to have layers to this character as opposed to just coming off a comedy act. And yet again, he was just a sponge and soaking up information on different layers of how to portray this character and how he wants this character to be in depth. And it was just you hear passion like that, but you really get to see it or be around it, and he was just there for it. And it kind of got me excited because I was really excited to see how this character was going to develop in the near future, because it seemed like he was taking a keen interest in this development.
The character development of Dick Dynamo with Miami Mike and with Hellfire McGuire.
I wouldn't even say he was a live wire. I would have said he really he was really passionate and eager to try something different with characters. He was still, I would say, still relatively young, and all of a sudden, and even still young in his business and years. I feel like he was trying to find his identity that would work for him and that would resonate to the audience, where all of a sudden he could feel comfortable and feel like he's doing something in this business. Because I feel like once you figure out who you are, or who you represent, or you figure out that character that works for you, everything else kind of falls into place.
That was interesting to hear also.
I'm character changes is hard, period, especially when you're trying to find somebody who's going to resonate with the audience. And it's a hit or miss. I feel like he had something, and he'll always have something. It's just having that confidence to keep pushing forward and until it's time to actually develop a new level to it.
What do you think the impact that he will be remembered by the other people that he worked with in wrestling, and how they'll remember him moving forward?
I feel like he just for me what affected me was I ain't gonna feel it took him really put me on my ass, and I found out his acting. It was just for the fact of yo, he was so eager, and when he saw me, he would ask, if it was okay to talk to me, which for him never a problem. He would chop it up when he was talking, just asking a bunch of questions and to ask me if this would work and stuff like that. And it was just the fact that he was so eager to help. He was so eager to use the information given to him, new information that was given to him, and apply it. It was like a breath of fresh air, because there wasn't a person that was just listening just to say he listened and not apply to get himself better, but he was listening to try and incorporate new information that benefited him, so he could establish something to something better for himself. It didn't seem like a person that was, open arms and just enjoy to be around, and it's Yeah, I'm sorry. I'm like, I feel like moments like that is just like, when you have a person that like so like caring and a person that is like so willing to go out their way to try and make sure that you're having a good time before and after the show. It just sucks that you lose them so early in life.
Yeah, that really hit me hard as a fan, and I've really had to think about how I was going to talk to my daughter about it, and we told her about it, and she was really sad about it too. So we just are going to the memorial show next week at MCW, and she's wearing her bow tie to it because she's worn her bow tie the last 2 months we went to shows. So I think there's going to be a lot of emotion and a lot of people remembering him next weekend. And I think it's going to be he's always going to be remembered by people that he worked with or that he knew or that he touched their lives somehow. And it's just good to hear so many people saying it now. I saw the written words after he passed, but I wasn't doing my podcast then, but now it's really good to hear all of the voices of the people and hear them actually saying the things about him and about the
Yeah.
impact that he had.
Nah, he definitely had an impact. It was just like, and it just sucks to lose someone like you just someone like with that had that much positive energy to perfection that we all eager to fulfill in life, and it just sucks.
Few questions for you. I just want to get a few minutes, and I appreciate you being with me to remember Brandon. And thanks again, and I'll try to have you back on again later for a full podcast episode.
Not a problem, man. I appreciate this.
Hello, my guests today are Miami Mike Walker and Hellfire McGuire as we discuss memories of Brandon Holman, who tragically passed away in May of this year. And I just wanted to welcome both Mike and Hellfire and thank them for being on the podcast today.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Jeff.
And I also wanted to start out briefly by asking both of you, you can go and whoever wants to go first can take it. If you could both briefly talk about how you got into professional wrestling and how you came to know Brandon Holman.
You could probably go first, Hellfire, if you'd like.
All right, sure. Yours is probably a more interesting story, but I was looking to get into pro wrestling. The East Coast seemed like the place to do it, and MCW specifically seemed to have sort of the top talent going at the time, so I thought that'd be a good place to start. Found Miami Mike Walker, and 2 years or so down the road, here we are.
Okay, Mike?
Yeah, man, I started training at MCW in 2017. Brandon joined 2017, a few months after me. So we've been training together for about 7 years. And me and Hellfire McGuire, that kind of just came about randomly hours before a show. They just paired us together. I didn't even know him. I knew that he was a good promo guy and that I was a good promo guy too. So at first I was pissed. I was like, why are they giving me a mouthpiece? This is my thing. I'm a promo guy. So, but needless to say, me, Hellfire, and Action Andretti had match of the night in Galena to open the show, and then the rest is history. We've been great pairing. And then with me, Hellfire, and Boom and Brandon, we've been tight ever since.
If you could talk about the first time you met Brandon and what your first impressions were of him.
First impression of him is, I imagine this is the same story you'll get out of most people, but he is he's a lot at first. He's as relentless as he is in the ring. That's he's the same way with friendship, and he will beat you and batter you into into getting to know him.
Yeah, I mean, kind of same thing for me. He was a guy that was just in your face nonstop. You didn't have a choice. You couldn't really get away from him. So he was kind of just ADHD off the wall. But everybody will have the same story about him as far as first impressions. But over time, you eventually get real close with him and whatnot, and then you build that relationship over time.
Yeah, he doesn't really give you a choice.
Yeah, he don't give you a choice. You don't if you're with him, you're with him.
Yeah.
He's gonna hop in your car whether he's invited or not. So that was kind of how that went.
I know. I remember when he was Boom, and I met him when he was Boom. He met my daughter, and he and JB were really good to us when we started coming to MCW shows. And then I saw him as Dick Dynamo at Combat Zone the first time, and I didn't recognize him at first.
Oh yeah, dude. He had like 80 gimmicks. He had a whole book of different variations of Boom, and they were ridiculous. They didn't like. Some of them were cool. If you tried to give him an idea, he like wouldn't take it. But if you worked with him on it, he would just put it into his own version, his own thing. He was super creative. But yeah, I mean, he was a different gimmick every few months. He kind of found different ways to reinvent himself.
Yeah, very creative and very stubborn. And I think
Very stubborn.
Dick Dynamo is probably uh, the the biggest sort of departure from the Boom character that he could have done and really pulled off.
A quick little backstory on that. Me and Miles Hawkins were actually helping him come up with that character. And we had shot a bunch of vignettes on what we thought the character was going to be, which was basically going to be himself. A dude that eats beans, lifts weights, and bangs MILFs. Like, that was a shoot. And, like, we filmed all this shit where he's wearing a flannel and jeans and he's acting crazy and just being weird in public. And then he completely changed the gimmick into this Clockwork Orange character. Like, it was completely opposite of what me and Miles talked about. But he made it work and he committed to it.
Do you remember any particular matches that you were involved in that he also had an impact on, and anything that you could talk about that?
Well, the last time I was in the ring with him, the last thing I remember seeing is the butt end of his cane coming at my face. So, yes, he he definitely had an impact on matches I was in. As far as when we were on the same side and working together, he had some really good ones when he was still trying to like sort of figure out what he was doing with the Dynamo character, and the Alex Divine one that he had in Hollywood is one I've gone back and watched because that one was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'll say for me, I'll just say this on the record: MCW fucked up not booking us. We would have had match of the night. They didn't really know how much chemistry we had in the ring. I mean, I've been training with him for years, and he was a lot better than what he showcased. They kind of put him with certain guys to build them up or whatnot. But he had a really weird crazy energy in the ring. He never got tired. His cardio was like insane.
Incredible, yeah.
Like he was. I mean, especially drills at practice. He was just like a nut job. This guy never got tired. Challenged me because there was a point in time where he was ripped and shredded. And I had a beer gut, and I had to compete with him. I was like, shit, because I used to always be a little more athletic than him, and I could kind of coast off that. But eventually, he surpassed me at the school. Him and Miles Hawkins were the top guys. Like they were, and I was playing second fiddle to them for a good year. But yeah, he had like a motor in the ring that was, I feel like if put with the right people, he could have showcased that. You know what I mean? But yeah, I mean that's what I'll say about that. I know he had a match with Joe Keys. He had a really good match with Dixon.
Oh yeah.
That tag match, probably one of the biggest pops of the night, the hot tag. But yeah, those are some that stick out to me.
And what kind of impact did Brandon have on the other wrestlers outside of the ring and say in the dressing room or the locker room and also on other people during training?
Yeah, like as we've kind of talked about, he was just relentless as far as trying to be your friend. And um, we've I know we've talked about it with some of the other wrestlers, and there's some stuff that I think they're putting into like a bit of a tribute package for him. But it's gonna be a lot of that story. Everybody's got a Boom story. Um, and they usually involve like a couple of the same themes. But yeah, Mike, what do you got?
Oh yeah, sorry, I missed that. Oh, you were talking about his imp. Yeah, I mean, he's just kind of guy that would lighten up the locker room. He's kind of like the class clown in the locker room. He made when everybody's like trying to focus on remembering their match or whatever the hell. Like he was just kind of the guy to make you forget about the seriousness of the show. He was a prankster. He was always messing with people. But funny thing with him is he had this way of getting that like weird side out of people, like that different kind of childlike, I don't know, personality out of people that you wouldn't see typically from certain guys, like the biggest, baddest dudes, because people felt comfortable just being themselves around them and whatnot. So I would say like that was his thing. He could get people's real, personality out just because he's not going to judge you. He's not that kind of guy. So he could get that out of people just by being himself or whatever.
Could we talk about Dynamo runs a show, the Brandon Holman Memorial Show coming up on August 10th at MCW RJ Meyer Arena in Joppa?
Oh yeah, so pretty much it's gonna be we're gonna have his family there. They're gonna do a little tribute to him. There'll be different vignettes of people talking about him and sharing stories about him. But it's gonna be a lot of matches of people he knew from years ago that maybe people haven't seen in a while. But yeah, we're gonna it's gonna be a tribute show for him, but it's gonna be a lot of good matches. I know Hellfire's match got announced with Will Ferrara. There's some others that are going to be announced, but yeah, that'll be a good show. That's August 10th, by the way.
That's right. It's August 10th, and I'll have it in my show notes for this episode, and I've already got my tickets.
Right on. Yeah, I'd like to hear that.
Awesome. Yeah, it'll be cool.
Let's just close by asking both of y'all what are some things that you'll remember moving forward in the future the most about Brandon?
For me, it is it's gonna be tough not to think about him anytime I'm in the gym because he was very motivating. I'll say that way. Um, and I think for me and a lot of people, anytime I crack open a can of beans, he's right there with me.
Yeah. So I think piggybacking off of Hellfire, yeah, man, I had some of my best workouts with him. And I didn't like his workouts. I didn't think they made sense, but his he had results though. I mean, he got huge and shredded in a very quick amount of time. He didn't let you rest or let you go easy at all. We would do 5 sets at 10 to 15 reps of biceps and then 5 sets, 10 to 15 reps triceps. Like, that would be one workout, and it'd be an hour and a half straight, like nonstop. So his workouts for sure helped me out a lot. I think, especially with him, I would say, like, you know, his situation is kind of a reminder, not to get too deep or whatnot, but his situation is really a reminder just to you gotta stay close with family. You gotta make sure that you're communicating with family and spending time, making time for your family and friends and whatnot. Because he was someone that was always around when you needed him or whatnot. Um, it's not really something you get over. It's just something you live with. But it's also I'm not going to say a blessing in disguise, but it brought a lot of people together. A lot of people haven't heard from in a while. Um, but yeah, I mean, ultimately his situation shed a lot of light on, different people and stuff they're going through. I'm talking to a lot more people now that I wouldn't talk to in the past. Spent some more time with family. I think that's the most important thing. But yeah, no, I mean he was awesome. He was a huge impact on so many people, and you don't really realize it when they're here. You only really realize it when they're gone. But that's what I would say ultimately about. We had a lot of good times. I used to go to Hellfire's place because they lived together. I don't know if he said that already. They lived together, but I used to just show up there in the middle of the day because I didn't feel like doing my job, and we would just play Call of Duty and annoy Hellfire because he was trying to work. So, but he was that guy. He was that friend that I needed at the time. I don't feel like do what I'm supposed to do, and I want to like mess around a little bit. So I would hang out with him on my free time, and then, do that. So it's good to keep those people close. That's what I would say overall.
Yeah, check in on your people.
Thanks again for joining us on Belts, Bumps, and Barbed Wire. Please join us for our next great episode wherever you get your podcasts. Now for our credits. Host is Jeff Quinton. That's me. Production assistant is Josie Quinton. Producer is Scott English. If you'll please check out dmvwrestlingnews.com every day to get the latest pro wrestling news from the Mid-Atlantic region and beyond, we'd appreciate it. Thanks again.